Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby.
Well, the Jaws are coming for President Biden.
The Jaws theme is coming for the Katz and Cosby show, too. That's a good one, Ed.
And, Ed Cox in the studio, along with John and myself and Rita. They're coming at him from all directions.
Yeah,
Senator Warner,
every direction.
Senator Warner is organizing the Democratic state senators. We have... Hakeem Jeffries is organizing the congressman.
What about the donors, John, too? Big money donors coming out, too.
Well, the truth is, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because Jill Biden and Hunter Biden is not going to allow his father to quit. And he just had a big fundraiser in Madison, Wisconsin, and he was good.
Yeah, he was defiant.
He read the teleprompter really well.
He did, and also, John, in the rally that he just did a little bit ago, and by the way, he's going to sit down, of course, with George Stephanopoulos shortly, too, as well. But in that rally, he was defiant. He was he's like, it's a vote for democracy, me, or the end of the world, Trump. I mean, he was nasty, defiant, and he also said, just like you said, John, I am staying in and I will win. It was like State of the Union, Joe. Didn't you think, John? It was more State of the Union, Joe.
I watched it.
Rita, that's what they all say just about when they're about to leave. The pressure's on him. He's going to react to it strongly, and then he's going to decide.
Well, what can they do to him if he says, I'm not leaving?
They can't do a thing. That's the problem.
He's got
control of it.
I don't think they'll be able to organize the 25th Amendment and organize his cabinet.
I don't think so.
It's
then
an
they
unworkable
would,
amendment.
By the way, then they
would
concede.
organize the cabinet against the president. It's not going to happen.
Including the vice president.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they would concede that they've known that there's a problem, too. I mean, that's why there's a lot of issues
you
here.
Expect the vice president to be the ringleader, as you were saying, John?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, by the way, we have an action-packed show, guys, coming up in just a second. Anthony Scaramucci is going to join us. Of course, he has been a big supporter of the president.
He did put out, let's see what Scaramucci
I
has
can't
to
wait
say.
to wait. He's going to break some news, I think, with us.
He put out a Twitter, and I think almost a Twitter. Did it say that in 30 days, Kamala Harris is going to be president? It
could be. We're going to ask him. We're going to have he's going to break some news here, guys. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. We also have Alan Dershowitz, Steve Moore. Greg Kelly did a blockbuster interview with Jill Biden's ex-husband.
If you haven't heard the interview with Jill Biden's ex-husband, my God. I couldn't stop listening.
I can't wait.
I can't wait.
And also we have Karl Rove and Miranda Devine. And John, I understand we've got some breaking news because we have Scaramucci calling in.
Breaking news, WABC.
And joining us now here on Katz and Cosby is Anthony Scaramucci, of course, the founder and managing partner of Skybridge Capital. Anthony, what do you think is going to happen with Joe Biden? What is your suggestion and your thoughts? Because, of course, you're an important player in a lot of this.
Well, you know, the president obviously is not doing well, and so we all have to be honest about that. And I had the opportunity to see him last Saturday out in East Hampton. He looked a little bit better than he did the prior Thursday when he had the failing debate performance, but Rita and John, you know, we have to be honest about these things and evaluate these things. I don't think he can make it to the election. I'm just being brutally honest, and I don't think he can make the next 4 years. And so,
can he make Mooch? Can he make the next 7 months?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think he can make it until the election. So, no, I don't think he makes the next 7 months. And I don't think he makes the next 4 years. And I think it's political malpractice at this point to suggest otherwise. But I think you guys know this because you're talking to a lot of people. It's the entire Democratic Party versus three people. It's President Biden, his son Hunter, and the First Lady Jill Biden. They're adamant, and they're digging their heels in. But you may have seen him last night. He's saying ho, ho, ho at the Independence Day rally. So to me, I think it's very unfair to the American people. Whether you like Donald Trump or dislike Donald Trump, the Democrats should put an opponent up that can put sentences together and has some neural flexibility off of a teleprompter. So we'll have to see what happens. But I said on our podcast, The Rest is Politics U.S., that, Kamala Harris will likely be the nominee. And so it'll likely be a Trump versus Harris election this coming November. I don't see any way around that at this point, guys. If you think differently, you have to tell me why, because he's having a hard time. He did well at this rally, but again, these are on prompter. When he's on prompter, he's comfortable, he's not stressed, he can read. But when he's off prompter and he's forced to have levels of cognition to put sentences together, he's not doing well. And I think it's unfair to his staff. It's unfair on behalf of his staff to tell the American people otherwise at this point.
Anthony Scaramucci, you brought up that fundraiser first off in the Hamptons. Is it true he was on prompter at a fundraiser with donors? That's typically, obviously, I've never really heard of that. What was your reaction?
Well, I mean, John and I did a lot of fundraisers together over the years, Democrats and Republicans. These fundraisers are quite informal. The candidate may speak for a few minutes. He may even take a few questions, he or she. But this was, he was behind a velvet rope. He was up on a podium. They had the presidential seal there, and he had prompter. He went to the podium and spoke from the prompter. I think the one thing he said, and I turned to somebody in the crowd. I said, I feel for him. His wife introduced him, the First Lady, and then before he got on prompter, he said, when we met, we had a 9-year difference in age. It's incredible to me that we're now 25 years apart, meaning he's 25 years older than her. He was saying it as a joke, guys, but I felt for him. It was definitely revelatory of where he is or where he thinks he is. And then he opened up his notebook and he began to speak off a prompter. And he can read the prompter, but you can't, we're giving him, this is the most powerful country in the world, still the strongest economy. There's lots of policy decisions that have to happen. John and I have talked about this on your air. There is a debt crisis for the United States looming. You have George Washington to George W. Bush, $7 trillion of deficit spending. Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden added an additional $28 trillion. So we're sitting here with $35 trillion worth of debt. We need a president in the next term, at least, to be honest with the American people and help us resolve this before we end up in a crisis and have to take emergency action, which I don't think would benefit anybody. So a lot of things have to happen here. Yep. Yes, sir.
Mooch. Will Jill Biden or Hunter Biden allow him not to be president? Because their lives depend on it, especially Hunter Biden. They're coming to take him away if Joe Biden is not president.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, I'll push this in front of you. If he makes a decision to drop out of the race and he pardons his son on the way out, he has obviously the ability to do that. There might be a public outcry related to that, but that would take that piece off the table. Moreover, President Trump has said that if he wins the presidency, he's going to pardon Hunter Biden. He's made that one of his campaign pledges. So I'd like to think that that's out of the equation. I think what's in the equation is they want to hang on. This is very Shakespearean. This is, when the bell is tolling, and the bell is tolling for you, John, or for me, we don't want to hear that bell. Of course, we have levels of denial in our personality. But the president's 81. He's frail. He's not handling himself well. And you'd have to imagine, I'm not a doctor, but you'd have to imagine the 2025 version of Joe Biden will probably be not an improved version or the 26, 27, or 28.
And how are they going to feel, real quick, because we're almost out of time, how do the voters going to feel knowing that Kamala Harris is going to be president? Because I don't think President Biden can make it through 4 years.
And Anthony, what do you think of Kamala Harris?
Yeah. Well, I mean, two things. One, to me, if I were them, I would be very bold. I would have him resign the presidency and hand it to her, have her run as an incumbent president. I think the media has been very hard on her, and I think she's an African American woman, and I think there is some profiling there and some stereotyping, which I don't like. But I don't think she would be the best choice, and I think the Democrats have made a mistake with identity politics. They put her in a position where, she's the number two, but I don't think it's the best choice. But that's going to be the choice I believe they go with, and we'll have to see how she does against Donald Trump. But I mean, They put themselves in an ugly situation, guys. I mean, that's just the facts.
Yeah, it is a mess. That is for sure. Well, Anthony Scaramucci, it's so great to have you here on Katz and Cosby with me and John. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Appreciate you so much, guys. Thank you again.
Wow. Anthony, thank you very much. Ed Cox, that was explosive. Anthony Scaramucci saying he doesn't see how President Biden is going to last a few more months, let alone the presidency, but also saying he doesn't think Kamala Harris is the best choice. That's big news here, Ed.
Look, he's lasted for 3.5 years. He can last politically because he just has to stay in office. He's got a staff around him servicing him. He can read from a teleprompter. He can keep going if he wants to.
Well, and it sounds like he wants to. The question is, it seems like to the beginning of our show, the walls are closing in. I mean, you have big supporters like Anthony Scaramucci. You have Abigail Disney. You got a whole bunch of folks, remember the Walton family. It's closing in, though, Ed.
But he's got a $250 million campaign fund that's already there. There will still be donors. Those are a few major donors.
And apparently he's spending $50 million to try to salvage his campaign. That came out a little bit ago with ads and a whole bunch. Boy, this is an incredible moment. Joining.
Let's go to Alan Dershowitz.
Yep, exactly. We have Alan Dershowitz now joining us, the great Harvard Law School professor emeritus. Professor Dershowitz, we want to get your reaction to something that is making a lot of headlines. These pro-Palestinian protesters on 4th of July burning American flags. It was so gut-wrenching and vile to see. What are they doing here? They haven't been arrested. And if they don't like this country, you know how I feel. Go ahead. Your thoughts, Professor.
Well, first of all, I love listening to my former student, Anthony Scaramucci. He always has wise, interesting, and provocative things to say. So, I'm so proud of him as a former student. These are not pro-Palestinian demonstrators. These are anti-American demonstrators. They're using the Gaza issue, the Palestine issue, as just another excuse to bring America down. And the fact that they're burning American flags on July 4th proves that beyond any doubt. Scratch an anti-Zionist, and you're going to find an anti-American. This is an attack on America, using the Palestine Gaza issue as the latest excuse. This has gone on for 100 years. The radical anti-American left has used every issue to try to bring down America, and we shouldn't in any way confuse what they're doing. They're not pro-Palestinian. If they were pro-Palestinian, they'd be demanding that Hamas do a ceasefire. Hamas is the only barrier to a ceasefire today. But these folks would never demand that Hamas accept the ceasefire, because the last thing they want is peace in the Middle East. What they want is continuing bloodshed and continuing efforts to destroy America. And that's why it's so disgusting to see people burn American flags. It not only brings tears to your eyes, but it just brings so much anger to people who are patriotic and who love America.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, when I saw this and I was looking at the video, I could not believe it. I agree with you. I love this country. I know you do too. All of our listeners do too. And it made me think, why don't you go over to Gaza and why don't you burn a Hamas flag? Let's see how long you last there. I mean, I was so outraged. Your reaction of just how I feel like ungrateful these people are to be in the greatest country in the world, and they have no clue of what these other countries would do if they start burning their flag on their Independence Day.
Or forget about burning a flag. Go to Gaza and have a rainbow flag. You'll be thrown off a roof. Go to Gaza and don't wear the appropriate Muslim garb, and you'll be put in jail. These folks who claim to support Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinians are supporting causes that are so such an anathema to democracy, and it's just appalling. Some of it's out of ignorance. These people just don't know, some of them. Others out of malevolence. I think a lot of it is out of just antagonism to the United States, to Judeo-Christian traditions, to Western democracy. And it's a war of morality. There's a right side of this and a wrong side of this. Look, you can be critical of any country. You can be critical of policies of the United States, of Great Britain, of France. We're seeing transitions all over the world today. Britain, new government. By the way, for the first time in history, you know that tonight, probably tonight, at 10 Downing Street, where the new prime minister is moving in, for the first time in history, Sabbath candles, Jewish Sabbath candles, will be lit because the wife of the new prime minister of Great Britain is a Jew who lights Sabbath candles and celebrates Sabbath with the children. So, you know, we're seeing such changes in the world today. France, we don't know whether they're going to move right or left. They're not going to move center. And America has to remain strong, and we have to move both parties away from radical extremes of the right and left and more toward the pro-American center.
Professor, give us your analysis of what the new government at the UK will be like. I mean, it was a landslide of 400-something to 150.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I know some of the actors in Great Britain. What we're seeing is the Labour Party moving way, way to the center. You know, under Corbyn, it was the most extreme anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-Western party among any democracies. They threw him out, and they moved toward a centrist who is supportive of American values and other values. But in France, we're not seeing that. In France, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing 33% of the polls show they support Le Pen, very right-wing, and 27% extreme left-wing, and only 23% Macron in the middle. So we're seeing changes all over the world, and that's why it's so important for the United States, the strongest country in the world, to maintain its balance as a centrist country. You can be centrist left, you can be centrist right. That doesn't really matter. The important thing is to support American values and move closer to the center and away from all of these extremes. I think it's a good development in Great Britain. I think it's a bad development in France. We'll have to wait and see what the election.
Well, I heard Ed Cox here, Professor. I heard the new prime minister saying, but we have to keep our momentum going. I think there's a real socialist base in his party that Corbyn, his predecessor's leader of the party, represented. And he knows that is still a problem for him, despite his big majority.
And, of course, Corbyn won his seat in a very close election, and he shouldn't have. Nobody should vote for somebody like Corbyn. But he's made a commitment to move to the center, and he has enormous power now because of the overwhelming nature of his victory. He can shape the party very much to his own ends, and I hope he'll do the right thing in doing so. But the most important thing in America, look, we're about to hear very important news, obviously, and that is we know that Biden made a very good speech in Wisconsin today, but how will he do when he's questioned by a very, very experienced interviewer? And that will tell us a lot about who the next president of the United States may well be. So,
are you saying that? What are you saying about the George Stephanopoulos interview, which is
coming up any minute?
Coming up.
Yeah.
They're supposed to do it today.
It could have a big impact. It could have a big impact. We'll probably hear the first indications of it on the 6:30 ABC News, and then obviously later on tonight we'll be able to see the entire interview live. So we'll be able to make our own judgment as to whether he stays in the race. He has indicated that he wants to stay in the race. And my view, just personally, is I prefer him to the devil I don't know. I'm so afraid the Democratic Party, if they dump him, will appoint somebody who is far, far, far to the left of him and much less supportive of the kinds of values that many of us.
So are you saying,
values.
Professor, the way you just said your words, are you saying you think he's really in control of things going on in the White House?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't know who's making the decisions, but I don't think it's President Bush.
But the American public will judge him.
President Biden. Yep.
Oh, yeah, I mean President Biden.
Yeah, they'll judge him by how he does in this interview. Nobody knows what goes on in the inner sanctums of the White House. And, people will make, first of all, there are two decisions to be made. He has to make the first decision. Is he going to stay on? And if he doesn't do well in the interview, he's not going to stay on. If he does do well, he's going to stay on. And then we have months to judge whether he is, A, competent now, and more importantly, will he be competent for the next 4 years? And if not, do we really want to see his vice president become the next president? Those are all fair issues to be considered.
Yeah, and
then, of course, Trump has to decide who to appoint as his vice president.
Right.
And we haven't heard really anything about that.
Yeah.
That could be very important.
There is so much drama. Yeah, real quick. Ed.
While his staff's been leaking like a sieve, that's only the outer staff. The inner staff, doesn't he have a very loyal, strong inner staff that understands him and is working with him that can keep him going for the next few months?
I think possibly, but remember, somebody who he was very intimate with leaked to the New York Times the fact that he's thinking about possibly dropping out. That's not loyalty.
Yeah, they're leaking like a sieve.
They are leaking, and we don't know how close they are to him. So, there's a lot of drama here and a lot of moving parts. And if anybody now predicts what the outcome in the next year, the next 6 months is going to be, I don't think they have a basis for doing it. We may know more in the next few hours. If
You're absolutely right.
Interview, it's over.
Yeah, nobody
Professor,
knows.
You're absolutely right. Nobody really knows, and I don't think Biden himself knows.
Yeah, and what an incredible moment it is. You're right. You're right.
Unprecedented.
Yeah, we're living through history, yeah.
We are. Professor, thank you so much. We so appreciate you joining us.
I just want to ask a question. Last week you were in Alaska, and we got you on
I know the answer,
Alaska.
but I'm not going to cheat.
Then we got you when you were in Paris. Can you tell us where are you today?
I'm in Dubrovnik.
Oh,
Croatia.
I told you I am so jealous.
I just celebrated Shabbos, Sabbath, with good friends on a friend's boat, and we're having a wonderful cruise in the Adriatic Sea. But, with the miracles of radio and the miracle of
internet,
of Wi-Fi, we can talk to each other as if I'm next door.
Well, can we be in your luggage? Can John and I and Ed be in your luggage on the next trip?
Thank you, Professor. Have a great weekend, and God bless America.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
And wow, what a world traveler he is. I love that.
Yeah.
And everybody stick with us here on Katz and Cosby. Steve Moore with an interesting story about Biden versus Trump on the economy. That after the break.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby, and joining us now is the great economist, Steve Moore. Of course, he hosts More Money on WABC Radio every Saturday right after Larry Kudlow. More Money, Saturday, 1 o'clock. On WABC Radio. Steve, you wrote a really powerful column. It says, vote for Donald Trump this November to ensure an economic miracle. Explain.
Well, if people want a robust and prosperous economy, we know who can give that to us, right, John? Because he's done it before, and, of course, that would be Donald Trump. And what I mentioned in my piece in the New York Post today is that if you look at so many of the major indicators of how the economy, that we care about, affordability, mortgage payments, things like how much economic growth we have. What we found is that almost every one of these Donald Trump outperforms Biden. A couple where Biden might be a little bit better. Actually, on the job front, Biden was a little bit better, but we got another report today that suggests the job market is slowing down. So I just wanted to remind people that Donald Trump did it again. He made America great once. He can make America great again.
What do you make when you heard even Biden just a few minutes ago, Steve, on the stage bragging, oh, well, he's created 15 million new jobs and look at the terrible inflation he inherited. I was like, where are the disclaimers?
Well, the main disclaimer, of course, is that there was no inflation under Donald Trump, none whatsoever. The inflation rate was way less than 2%. It was like 1.5% when Trump left office, and then 18 months later, it was 9.1%. It's hard to blame that on Donald Trump. We know that the inflation president is clearly Joe Biden, and then on the other issue that you mentioned about jobs. Guess what? Over half of those jobs he's bragging about are jobs that were basically existed when Trump was president and then just became there were comeback jobs from. So how do you give Biden credit for that? These guys seem to forget that we had something called COVID, where so many of the governors shut down their economy, including your governor in New York and the governor of Connecticut and the governor of New Jersey. And, of course, their jobs went away when you shut down the businesses. But, look, I think most people, if they're going to vote their pocketbook, John,
you have to vote for President Trump. You cannot vote for President Biden because don't forget what President Biden did. He doubled the price of gasoline. He increased the price of food 30-40%.
Yes.
He doubled the price of getting a new mortgage. I mean, he made poor people poorer, and he made the middle class poorer.
Well put. That's exactly the point we made in our article. The average family, John, is about $2,000 poorer today than they were when Biden came into office because of the high inflation. Prices are up 20% across the board, but you're right, for groceries, for gasoline, for rental payments, for mortgage payments.
The stuff that people spend money every day, gasoline, food, they all went up, and President Biden is completely 100% responsible.
I couldn't agree more. And then you look at, what Biden wants to do. He wants to raise taxes through the roof. I mentioned that Trump has an incredible agenda of deregulating, make the tax cuts permanent, and promote American energy, John.
Yep, absolutely right. How does Trump say it? Drill, baby, drill, because the only thing that's going to do, you bring down the price of oil from $100, $83, $84, and Brent is $87, $88. You bring it down to $55 again. Guess what? Russia is broke. Iran is going to be broke too, and that's what we want. We want America and Canada to control the world in fuel.
Well, we did. We did when Trump was president. North America.
We're going to do it again.
Center of the world. We'll do that again.
We're going to do it again.
And we will defund OPEC and the Russians.
Thank you so much, Steve Moore, and we're looking forward to listening to you tomorrow between 1 and 3.
Thank you, John. Have a great weekend, guys, and happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July. Okay, Rita, you have some hot news for us from Goya?
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
Yes, I sure do, John. Well, President Biden, as we discussed, is set for his first TV interview after his dismal debate performance. The interview with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos is going to be shown in its entirety at 8 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. In Wisconsin today, while campaigning, President Biden vowed to stay in the race and said that he will beat Trump in November. But the donors are dropping out of Biden. An heiress of Disney says that she's going to stop donating to Democrats unless Biden is replaced on the presidential ticket. Abigail Disney told CNBC she intends to stop any contributions to the party until Biden drops out. And also other news, the Wisconsin Supreme Court is issuing a decision reinstating the use of ballot drop boxes in the battleground state. This overturns a decision that the court made less than 2 years ago that banned the use of most of those boxes. And those are the hot Goya stories of the day.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC. Breaking news, WABC.
Wow. Let's stand by. This is Jill Biden's ex-husband. What is his name?
Yeah, it's Bill Stevenson.
Bill Stevenson. And all the things that happened to poor Bill Stevenson that after Senator Biden started dating his wife and didn't tell anybody.
Wow, with Jill Biden. I can't wait to hear. Here is that blockbuster interview with Greg Kelly, our own Greg Kelly, interviewing Bill Stevenson, Jill Biden's ex-husband.
Are you in Delaware right now?
Yes, I am, sir. I'm in Delaware. I'm actually in my office, and I am about a mile and a half from the Biden house.
Wow. It's a tiny state, that Delaware. How many counties?
3 counties. And it's funny you mention that because Joe Biden lost the southern county of Sussex, tied in the center county of Kent, and won in the county where Wilmington, Delaware is, where I live. But he only won 54% of the vote in his home state. That's pretty funny, right?
That is interesting. I didn't realize that. All right, look, I guess let me cover this real quick. You were young. You were living, you were living the life. You were in your early 20s. You met Jill. You fell in love. You got married. Everything was fine. She's going to school. You're doing your business. And you start volunteering for Joe Biden. You start hanging out with him, raising money for him. He wins the election. He loses his wife and 2 children, but he's got his other kids. At some point after he becomes a United States senator, it is believed that your wife started seeing Joe Biden romantically. Can you tell me how you found out about that truth, how you learned that she was now seeing Joe Biden?
It's an easy story, Greg. First of all, we were married for very close to 5 years. Things were going good. My business had taken off. We were young. She was 18. I had just turned 21 when we met in the summer of 1969 in Ocean City, New Jersey. And she came up and asked a question about my car. Next thing I know, 6 months later, we're married. And, it was a pretty strong and very successful marriage. I think Jill has got to come to reality that this man is struggling, that it's not fair. I've heard the word elder abuse often and referring to her. I don't know what to do other than just speak out, let everybody know how I feel about this. But somehow, for the better of this country, I think that President Biden has to step aside. And I hope that Jill steps aside with him.
And in November, you're voting for?
President Trump, 100%, baby.
Bill,
I love the guy. Listen, I love the guy's politics. I've loved him as a businessman for years. He is the real deal, and I just wish that people understood him a little bit better because he is going to be so good for this country the next 4 years. I pray that he is president of the United States, and I appreciate you, Greg.
Thank you, Bill. And you guys have an amazing connection, an amazing connection, both hauled into court on fake crap because of Joe Biden, you and Donald Trump. It's quite a connection. Very interesting, very unique. Bill?
I think God brought this little connection into my life when I realized a couple years ago that Joe Biden is doing the exact same thing with the federal Department of Justice. I mean, I hate to brag, but I'm a pretty popular guy down here in Delaware. I'm well known. I was named one of the 50 most influential people in Delaware over the last 50 years. With him, by the way, he was one of the other 50. And that's an honor that I cherish. So it's not like I'm not well known or not respected, but he used the Department of Justice on me 40 years ago, the exact same MO that he's using on former President Trump now. And as much as I can speak out, I'm going to in the next 4 months because the people have to know what's going on. It happened before. It's happening now, Greg.
Bill Stevenson, thank you. You are a winner. We look forward to your book. We'll have you back when it comes out. And Bill Stevenson, thanks for being with us.
Well, our editor didn't get the entire Greg Kelly story. There was more there. I heard.
Yeah, because you heard the whole thing. Yeah, tell us the whole thing, because the essence.
And what happened? Somebody came to tell Stevenson. By the way, your wife is hanging around with Senator Biden,
right?
And he didn't want to believe it. No husband wants to
right,
believe
of course,
that.
yeah.
Then the next thing he knows is his wife is a good driver, and that he bought her a brand new car, and she had an accident. So he goes to talk to the people she had an accident with. He said, "Oh no, your wife wasn't driving. It was Senator Joe Biden driving your car."
Wow.
And then after the divorce settled, Joe Biden, who seems to be mean-spirited, goes after Stevenson, her ex-husband, even though the divorce was amicable or whatever. I don't know. I don't remember it goes after Stevenson and gets the Department of Justice to indict him because he was 8 days late on $8,000 in federal taxes.
Wow.
Indict him, have him arrested in handcuffs.
Wow, that is spiteful, John.
I mean, does that sound familiar of things going on with President Trump?
With President Biden, right? Going after Trump.
And remember what I said, and with sources unknown, things that happen in Albany and things that happen in the city were forced upon them by the White House.
And by the way, I'm also being told that the full interview, it's about 16 minutes. The full interview is on the WABC podcast, and you can get it again. It's Bill Stevenson and also Greg Kelly. And that is blockbuster, John, because it goes to his character.
Everybody should listen to the full interview.
Absolutely. And, John, today, just a little bit ago at the rally, guys, and he said, this election's about character, about family values, about this. And then you hear this interview, John. And what you just shared, that's blockbuster. We have with us Karl Rove, you guys, also, who's joining us right now. Of course, the great former senior advisor to George W. Bush. Karl, your reaction to what you just heard.
I wonder if Karl liked that interview.
Yeah, what'd you think, Karl?
Well, I heard too little of it to really form an opinion, but you whetted my appetite.
No, well, you'll have to go to WABC podcast and listen to the whole thing, Karl Rove,
There we go. Now, Rita, will you be doing the introduction? Because that would be an extra incentive for me to listen.
I will definitely. If you're going to listen, I will be happy to do it, my friend. I love you, Karl. Karl, it's interesting because it does tee off to just a little bit ago. We heard from President Biden at the rally, and he was very nasty towards Trump. It was one of the nastiest I think I've seen him. And it was sort of the State of the Union Joe I used because it was the angry Joe again, after very different than the debate. But then at the end, he's like, we're essentially saying we're the party of unity. We're the party of kindness. We're the party of democracy. Everything's on the line. And you can vote for the other guy. But after what we just also shared, when you hear what a bunch of hogwash, Yeah,
well, look, I love it. It isn't one of the essence of democracy that we have a constitution that lays out the roles of the various branches of government, and we divide the power in our government, our national government, between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And here's the executive attempting to give away trillions of our dollars, hundreds of billions of our dollars in student loan forgiveness, which is the legislative responsibility. They're supposed to be the people who appropriate money, and this president has been slapped down several times by attempting to usurp the right of the Congress to write the budget and spend the money subject to his signature. He's been trying to say, I'm in charge of giving away hundreds of billions, over $1 trillion in student debt relief, and he's gotten slapped down by the courts. Now, talk about an anti-democratic move. It is to usurp the power of the legislative and take it all in the hands of the executive.
But Karl,
look,
those kids don't know the difference. Those kids are going to vote for Democrats to get their loan back.
Well, I'm not certain they can be easily so bought off because a lot of them don't have loans. A lot of them understand that when they took out a loan, it was a moral responsibility to repay it. There's a reason why
Joe Biden's running, I think it's like 15 points behind among young voters where he was running 4 years ago, and I think this is one of it. People get insulted when you try and make them believe that they can be bought off for peanuts.
Well, you know what? I think also people are insulted when they hear Joe Biden on the stage just now, where he's saying, "Oh, democracy's on the line," and all I can think about, Karl Rove, is, you know, as John was just describing, look what happened, all the lawfare against President Trump. Look at all the court cases that have been lodged against President Trump. And then you hear, obviously, you know, we were just talking about the ex-husband. I mean, there's like, you know, and then you hear Hunter Biden is sitting in intelligence briefings. I know that on Monday, Mike Turner is going to try to get to the bottom of that, if that's true or not. I mean, I would say that's a risk.
Well, look, I don't know whether he was or he wasn't, but I do know this. There's pretty solid evidence he was at the weekend at Camp David giving his father advice to stay in the race. Who is Hunter Biden to be giving advice? Here's the guy who had the bad judgment to trade on his father's name, getting into some sleazy, shady deals with bad operators in China. Here's a guy who had no experience in corporate governance, no experience in energy, no experience in the country of Ukraine, and he's getting paid $80,000 a month trading on his father's name, as the father is the sitting vice president of the United States in charge of a policy towards Ukrainian corruption. And when he went over there, when Vice President Biden went over to Ukraine in November, I think it was 2015, community groups involved in fighting corruption in Ukraine said, "What are you doing lecturing us on this important issue when your son is part and parcel of it?" And here's the guy who's already been found guilty of lying on his gun record while he was addicted, and is now going to face a trial for $1.4 million in unpaid taxes. And he is supposedly telling the president of the United States, "Hey, Dad, you got to run again." Who wants to depend on judgment like that?
Yeah, exactly. Ed Cox, you have a question for Karl Rove.
So, Karl, here the President Biden in his most stentorian voice. He is in it. He's going to win it. What does that tell you?
Well, look, his campaign's bleeding out in front of us. And, I mean, this is nothing new. First of all, remember, that speech in Wisconsin was off of a teleprompter. You know, please, don't tell me that he is back. I mean, a year ago, the polls were saying that 2/3 of the American people thought he lacked the mental stamina, the mental acuity, I think the question was, to serve effectively as president. And it's only gotten worse. And what they're essentially asking is, who are you going to believe, us or your lying eyes? And we all saw that in the debate. It was painful to watch. No American, Republican or Democrat, could look at that and say, "God, I feel better about our country." And where in the leadership that in whose fate, who holds its fate in their hands.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Karl Rove, thank you very much. And I'll try to do the introduction so you can go to WABC Podcasts.
There we go. Thank you, Rita.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, Karl. Thank you. And everybody, coming up on Katz and Cosby, we're going to talk to Miranda Devine about the media cover-up of Joe Biden. That after the break.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby, and everybody wondering, what is Joe Biden going to do in this interview that's going to be coming out shortly on ABC News with George Stephanopoulos? Supposedly no teleprompter, but it will be pre-taped. He also had a rally today. But what about the media suddenly pretending like it's an epiphany that Joe Biden maybe doesn't have all his mental capacities? Well, joining us now is Miranda Devine. You have broken so many big scoops on all this, the New York Post reporter. Miranda, your reaction of sort of the media's role in all of this from beginning to literally right now at this moment as we're waiting for what could be a do or die interview for his campaign.
Hi, Rita. Look, I just think it's preposterous that the same media who have been pretending since the 2020 campaign, I mean, it was obvious in January of 2020 in Iowa that Joe Biden had cognitive malfunctions, and they pretended that there was nothing wrong with him. They've pretended he is. And then now they expect us to believe that they just suddenly realized that he's shot. No, it's just that it's become so obvious, thanks to the debate performance, that they can no longer cover it up. So now they're backtracking and trying to finesse the timeline and, saying, oh, well, there were a few recent clues. No, it's been crystal clear since January of 2020 and before that Joe Biden had memory lapses, was wandering, needed teleprompter support to give a basic stump speech. So, look, we shouldn't be surprised. These are the same people that told us that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. And you can expect that they're going to keep on lying right up until the 2024 election and beyond if Donald Trump wins.
Ed Cox.
Yeah, Miranda, you brought up a very important point. People forget that the people in Iowa and New Hampshire back in the 2020 primaries took a look at him up close, and his opponents were locked in their seats as a jury on the impeachment trial in the Senate, and they got a good look at him, and they put him fourth in Iowa and fifth in New Hampshire. I never saw anyone scored that badly in those two and yet go on to win the nomination. Something happened in South Carolina, and I think Obama was involved in it. But the people in Iowa and New Hampshire saw he was incompetent back then.
Yes, they did. You're so right. And in South Carolina, of course, Jim Clyburn, who's the Democratic kingmaker, just gave his imprimatur to Joe Biden, and that rescued his completely dead campaign. And then, if you remember, Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, who were the front runners, got tapped on the shoulder, and they agreed to go quietly in return for some sort of benefits from the Democratic Party. I mean, that is what the Democrats do. They do stick together.
They do stick together. I have no doubt that Obama was involved in sorting that out because he saw that Trump would beat Bernie Sanders, who was getting momentum at that time, because of Biden's weakness in the primaries and the caucus in Iowa.
Yeah, really interesting. Go ahead, Miranda.
I was just going to say they carried him over the line. He promised at that point that he was only an interim president who would pass on to the younger generation. His then stepping forward to run in 2024, I think, was his gravest mistake, because the party would have sort of eulogized him and turned him into a hero if he had passed on the baton like he promised.
I want to ask you, Miranda, too, because we literally are on the precipice. We're supposed to be getting maybe within minutes, a clip at least of this interview with Joe Biden and George Stephanopoulos. Again, it's pre-taped. They say they're not going to edit it. It's supposed to be running full tonight. And then next week, he claims he's going to be doing some sort of a little bit of a press conference with NATO folks, because a lot of the NATO leaders. But this is still so micromanaged. You and I have been in journalism a long time, Miranda. And if he really wanted to, or if this was President Trump, for example, darn well, if they made some accusation like this after a dismal debate performance like Biden had, Trump would have come out the next day and said, I'm here. He would have come out in the briefing and said, I'm here for the next 5-6 hours. I'll answer whatever questions you have. No script, no teleprompter, nothing. And it still seems so micromanaged. It is really stunning, this moment. And do you think that President Biden can kind of have another sort of mini basement campaign like he did during COVID?
Well, they may try it. At the moment, certainly Hunter Biden is there as his chief strategist in the White House, hanging on for grim life. So let's see if the Democratic grandee become Hunter Biden with Jill Biden and various other aides behind him.
So where does it go from here after this interview tonight? Again, there's been these moments, and listen, George Stephanopoulos, we've known him a long time, obviously a seasoned broadcaster, but he did have ties to the Clinton White House, knows the Bidens well. He did the famous interview with him after the Afghanistan withdrawal, where Joe Biden, even there, said, nobody told me to get out of Bagram. So to George's credit, he said, nobody. And he said, no. And it turned out that wasn't correct. There are a lot of wrong things. What are you expecting tonight, and how critical is this if he continues on this drip, drip, drip? What do you see? And do you see that the media has now sort of turned, Miranda, because during these briefings, Every question is now about his competence. Every question. Do you think he's lost now, the media, that there's such egg on their face from things that you and others have been reporting, we have for a long time?
Well, it is face-saving by the media, but I don't think that any interview, especially pre-canned with George Stephanopoulos, is going to save Joe Biden. And look, we will see, though, from the questions that Stephanopoulos asks, exactly what direction the establishment party is going, because Stephanopoulos is renowned as the Clintons' cleanup merchant. Bimbo eruptions, he was responsible for tidying that up. He will do what the party wants, and so he'll either expose Biden to further ridicule, or otherwise he will cover up for him and allow him to sort of muster up some sort of dignity in the interview.
Miranda, last question. The media, all the media that was supporting President Biden, three choices. Were they stupid? Were they told to do that by their corporate owners? Or was it something in their heart?
I really do think that most of the media genuinely believes that Donald Trump is an existential threat, and that Joe Biden, for some reason, they've bought the mythology that he's a decent man, which he is the opposite of. And so that's in their heart. But also, you can't necessarily blame the Washington press corps entirely. It's their editors back home that just don't elevate this story about Joe Biden's cognitive problems to the level that it deserved. And again, it's because they were in the tank for the Democrats against Donald Trump. They think that, they even talk about throwing objectivity out the window when it comes to Donald Trump because he's a different case. They always have an excuse.
Miranda, last thing. You should listen to Greg Kelly's interview with Jill Biden's ex-husband, Mr. Stevenson, and what he's doing now to Donald Trump, he did 40 years ago to Mr. Stevenson. He owed $8,000 in taxes, eight days late, and Senator Biden had him, Stevenson, arrested in handcuffs for $8,000. He put the Department of Justice on him. Well, you should listen to Greg Kelly's interview. It's going to be on WABC website.
Good on Greg.
And that will. I think that will give you your next big story.
Thank you, Miranda, so much. Thank you. And guys, before we leave, I want to say a shout out to, of course, the Staten Island Ferry Hawks. They had a wipeout, huge win against the Hagerstown Flying Boxcars. And you were there. You saw it.
I was there. I had 3 hot dogs, and they were great hot dogs.
Oh, I'm jealous. Ed, I am so. The hot dogs are so good there. I'm so jealous. Wow, and how fun. And fireworks, too, which was
fireworks,
so awesome.
Popcorn.
Dogs and baseball. What a combination.
I know, awesome.
4th of July.
Play ball.
Oh, and what do we all stand for, guys?
Truth,
justice, and the American way.
Hi, it's Lou Dobbs for Priority Gold, America's precious metals dealer. These are volatile times with high inflation, soaring debt, wars on multiple continents, and rising financial stress. Central banks are buying gold to diversify their reserves, so are many Americans. Call Priority Gold and find out how precious metals can help you diversify your portfolio. They're highly rated and happy to help. Call 1-866-303-6357 or get a free gold guide at PriorityGoldGuide.com. That's PriorityGoldGuide.com.